being able to do this was actually kind of fun because it harkens back to when I started in the late 90s in the vacuum industry. And all right, guys, we are back at the workbench, and today we've got a Riccar, what model is this? VIB PBP, which is the lifetime belt version of the Vibrance, or former R series. So, now this one came in with a cryptic note on it we took that said brush. So, what that means, I don't know. We'll find out. So, what we're gonna do is we're gonna flip this over and see what is going on, see if it's not turning or what is happening. So, on these guys here, pretty simple units. You've got a steel bottom plate, steel brush roll as well. And I'm thinking that maybe the clutch is slipping. We'll have to check it. But to get this bottom plate off, you don't actually need any tools. You just flip this switch and you pull from these two tabs where it says pull. Simple. All right. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Let's see if we can get a close-up of this. So this is what's going on right here. So this is the clutch assembly. This enables the brush roll on-off switch for bare floor. But there's a very particular way that these have to fit in. There's a fork on this side, which I'll show you, and that needs to be pointing down to stabilize the brush roll so it doesn't rotate when you make the switch. And that is off here to the side. So somebody's been in here maybe cleaning the brush roll because it doesn't have any buildup of hair or anything like that. But somebody's been in here and didn't get it back together correctly, and that's what's causing their issues. So we can fix that. Yep, the whole assembly is upside down. That would do it. Okay. So the clutch is oriented correctly in terms of the way that it's assembled. So you've got the hook for the arm, this guy. This little hook rides right in here in this movable cam. Then you've got the immovable cam, which is this plastic fork, which comes down, and again, it's supposed to be oriented down. So this is oriented correctly. Now, one thing that can occur, particularly if you do a lot of hot switching, basically by what I mean by that is flipping the brush roll on and off while the vacuum is on. That is a no-no on these particular machines. You want to turn the vacuum off, wait for it to stop, make the switch, then turn it back on. Because what can happen is it has these rubber pads right here, which when you engage the clutch, if I move this, the belt pulley comes down and makes contact with this rubber clutch. What can happen is if you keep doing those switches while it's running, it will glaze and wear this rubber pad so that you don't get positive connection and it starts to slip. It's just the way that it's designed, and it doesn't mean that it's a bad design. You just need to know not to do the hot switching, or you're going to have to replace that clutch pack and sometimes even this pulley. So let's check and see. The best way to tell if you've got an issue here is to engage the clutch and turn it. And if you can turn this by hand easily, which I can, it means either you need to add a washer to adjust this to be tighter, or if this is too far gone, you need to replace it. So we do need to get in here and check this out. So this will actually be a pretty fun video. So what we do is there's a cotter pin right here. Just go ahead and pop him out. Usually it's pretty easy. There we go. It feels like there was a lot of pressure on that pin, like it's already been adjusted. Okay, so this is the approved way to adjust the clutch, which, if you can see here, are these little washers. I don't know what they're made out of. It's actually a pretty expensive material that doesn't melt and has good friction properties. But these little wafer thin washers are what you put in to increase the positivity with which the idler pulley here engages with the clutch pad. So let's take that off, this off, and now let's look at the pad. So you can see here that there is some glazing. There is some glazing, and there's a ridge right here where the pad has worn down and the outside has not. So they have been doing a lot of switching of this while it's running. It's something that we'll need to let them know not to do in the future. So based on the wear on this pad, and based on the fact that there was a ton of tension when I took that cotter pin out, I don't think we're going to get a whole lot more in terms of positive engagement. So I think the best and simplest option for us and this customer is for us to replace this pad. I think that that's going to get us where we need to be. One other thing while this is in here that I wanted to check is the length of the brushes, because they look a little bit short. Yeah, so you can see this. So you can see here, rotate that around, you've got a good, oh man, maybe it's over 1/8 of an inch, but not quite 1/4 of an inch, but you've got several millimeters of brush wear on this. And the one thing about Riccar uprights is that they groom really well, very aggressively, but with that you want to keep brushes on them, because as soon as these start to wear and wear down, you're not going to be making as positive an engagement with the floor. You're not going to be cleaning as well. So we're going to go ahead and replace these as well. They're relatively inexpensive. So we're going to go ahead and replace them. So I just pulled this guy out. There is a felt seal right here, which I'm going to go ahead and replace because that's dirty. This bearing, although it's dirty, has no grit, turns freely. I think we're good on that, so I don't think we need to replace the bearing. So to get this guy apart, what we're going to do is we just take a screwdriver and just pry down in between the brush strip and the clutch itself, and just pry it out like so. Pretty simple. That is the old clutch pack, and it has a bearing built into it where the inner rod rides. Okay, and because we're going to be replacing the brushes, we also want to remove the opposite side plate, which is a metal plate. So we're going to go ahead and again just give it a little shimmy. Now, because it's metal, it's not quite as pliable as the plastic, so you may have to go side to side to kind of work it out. Go slow because you can break these plates. They're not like they're a fine metal for what they're in, but not really meant for prying on. Okay, that should wiggle out. Boom. All right, so now we have access to all 4 brush strips. To get those out, I just like to take a pair of pliers like this and just pull. And it's really that simple. Now, one of the nice things about Riccar and them having these steel cord brush rolls is that you can do repairs like this. They're very robust, and you can rebuild them. And you know, at the end of the day, you're going to probably spend the same amount rebuilding this as you would for just a new plastic brush roll on some cheapy machine. But here's the thing, it's going to do a better job and be more resilient in the meantime to, you know, to things like hair wrapping or melting, that kind of thing. So it's going to be more reliable. And secondly, you know, let's talk about waste. You know, we have a real problem here in the US with a lot of our appliances, like, you know, we don't repair parts, we just replace them, and the other one goes in the landfill, right? So in my opinion, this is a much more responsible way to go. I can rebuild these all day long, and the amount of waste produced by removing the brush strips and disposing of those versus chucking an entire plastic brush roll is a night and day difference. So it's just a more responsible ownership experience as well. So what we're going to do is, while we are in here, there's some dust. So I like to clean these up a little bit before I start reassembling. And it started its life out chrome, but it's been worn by dirt and time, so it's not going to be sparkly shiny, but it'll look a lot better than it does now. We'll get some of this grime. Brush rolls and brush roll chambers tend to build up what we call in the business, a lot of people call it Kirby cake or just grease, toe jam, but it's basically environmental fallout. A lot of it's related to oils in your environment, so be that from bare feet, be it from cooking greasy foods. You know, those environmental contaminants basically end up sticking to your vacuum. So you can see I was able to get quite a bit of that off with very little effort. And that's looking quite a bit better. We'll do a little further sprucing as we get it back together. Now you take your new brush strip and you just throw it down in here like this, and you kind of give it a little bit of a twist, and it should just ride down and into its position. Sometimes it rides a little high. You got to kind of tap it down so that it gets flush with this, with the end of the steel core. Just a little tap. Sometimes I like to take one of these guys, just a rubber mallet, just tap on the brush itself, not on the metal. And now he's flush or just a little bit below, and that's exactly what we want. So we just do this 4 times. There we go. Now we got our brand new brushes in here. Now, one thing that we'll let the customer know about is that when these are brand new, they have to seat a little bit, meaning they might make some contact with the chamber walls, and you'll hear a little bit of a clickety-clack, and that's okay. It's not hurting anything. The brushes will automatically cut off to the length they need to be. It's kind of like wearing in your tires. You know, it will automatically correct itself in relatively short order. So let's go ahead and clean the grime off of this bearing. Now, this is a sealed bearing, but it does have a rubber seal on it. Now, because it is smooth, because there's no grinding in it at all, I'm going to clean this top off, but I'm of the mind that if you break this seal, you're just inviting more dirt and the bearing will fail sooner. So if it feels okay, again, completely smooth, the best thing to do is just to add a little drop of oil to kind of reinvigorate the grease down inside. It'll make it past that seal. Just a little bit of oil right there, and that is all that we want to do to this. We don't want to open it up and repack it because there's no grinding. If there was grinding, we could go in and clean it out and try to repack it and see if we could save it, but in this case, this is just doing a little preventative maintenance. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and pop this guy back in here just like this. There are cutouts here where the brushes are supposed to go, so you just line those up, and sometimes one side fits better than the other, maybe where it originally sat. And what we'll do is with our soft mallet, just give it a very easy tappy tap around the edges. Again, not wailing on it because it is metal, it can bend. There we go. So yeah, nice and flush, as we can see there. And we're a little proud on this side. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so now this side is taken care of. Now we need to tap in the new clutch pad, which is right here. So we want to keep this free of like oil or debris or grease, so I'm going to try not to touch it with my fingers since I've just been oiling stuff. So just tap that in the same way until it's flush. There's no sides that are proud. And now we've got it halfway assembled. So now we are going to take off this old felt, which has done its job. It's time to retire it. And we're going to replace it with a new felt to keep dirt and hair out. And this is a rubber insulator on a metal cap. So again, very nicely constructed. I'm going to go ahead and put that through on the bearing end, non-belt end. And now we've got the excess rod right here that we can go ahead and rebuild the clutch on. So this guy here is looking fine. Let's check the bearing. Bearing's super smooth. Again, we're just gonna add just a smidgen of oil. Nothing bananas. And again, we don't want a lot of excess oil, particularly on this bearing, because again, on the other side, we have our clutch plate, which we want to keep pretty much free of any kind of greasy contaminants. So, oops, and before we do that, we take our spring, put that on first, because this is spring loaded, so that when we remove the pressure of the clutch, this will automatically ride away from the clutch pad. So we pop that on there. And now we take our moving cam, which is the metal cam that has the hook on it, and we're going to go ahead and drop that into place. And we can see where it has been riding. They use this switch a lot. You can see where it's kind of polished up and burnished here where it's been riding against this plastic clutch. And what we're going to do here is, real quick, I'm going to clean this up. Now, some people like to add like a little dollop of grease here and here. I'm of the opinion that, again, it's too close to that clutch pad. I don't want anything getting hot and sloppy and getting in there and messing up the pad. This, because it's metal on plastic, there's a natural amount of it's low friction, so the plastic will make it low friction. It's not like it's metal on metal, so I've never had issues with keeping this as a dry application. So this is like a notched fitting, so we put it in the notched spot here. We make sure that when we put it in that the fork is opposite of the clutch engagement mechanism. Now, what we want to do is we want to see how much we need to shim this in order to get positive engagement. We'll go ahead and start with 2 of these washers. There are a total of 3 on it right now, but we're going to go ahead and put 2 on. Sometimes you have to play with this a little bit to get the right fitment. A little bit of grunge in here. All right. So we go ahead and put this on. There is a notch in this metal cap for the fork. Now we're going to slide this guy back in. So we reassemble with our cotter pin. And now what we're going to do to test this out is we are going to go ahead and engage the clutch by moving this moving cam right here. And now we are going to check and see how much tension there is and whether or not I can turn this by hand. I still can turn it by hand. We will want to add another washer, but already there is it's much harder to turn. So we're looking pretty good right now. So I think 3 washers and we should be pretty much set. So what we're doing right now is kind of a lost art. Again, because a lot of brush rolls are not repairable anymore, you don't get the opportunity to, these are the small joys, getting to rebuild something. You know, add a few new parts and make something that was, you know, not functioning properly, function properly again. And I love this. It's almost like therapy for me to do something like this. Because it's a dying breed of machines where you can do this kind of work. And Riccar is one of the last of them where you can. So now we're going to go ahead and try this again. We're going to go ahead and move the cam so that it's locked. And oh yeah, yep, can't turn that by hand. We are good to go. Very nice. So we're going to disengage the clutch now. And now what we're going to do is I'm just going to clean this chamber up just a little bit with the vacuum. Now, all of this linkage in here looks good. I'm going to drop this under here, keep it up a little bit. So all this linkage looks pretty good, but one thing that I do like to do is there are some screws here which hold in the linkage and the switch, and I just like to make sure that those are snug. You don't want to over tighten them because they're small screws, but you know, with age, sometimes things can jiggle loose, and I want to make sure that that's a nice tight engagement. And those are nice and tight, so there's no problem there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take this lifetime belt, loop it over the motor shaft. There are tracks. It's like a serpentine belt on a car. There are tracks on the motor shaft that this needs to fit in. So now I've got it in place there. Bearing on this hall sensor feels good. So now we're going to take this guy, our fresh and clean brush roll, and we're going to put him in his tracks. Now again, remember, we've got our fork right here, and we've got on the opposite side the mounting point for the movable cam where the linkage comes into it, and we want this to be facing up and we want the fork to be facing down. So we're going to move this linkage out of the way, and we are going to go ahead and drop this into position with the proper orientation. Perfect. So the fork is engaged, it's not moving side to side, everything looks good, belt is in its track. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this linkage and we're going to go ahead and just put this right into this, movable cam. There is a spring right here, which you can see, that keeps this from wanting to track out of that. So there's really nothing that retains this other than this spring, and that works fine. You don't really see issues unless things get super boogered up. And let's see, so let's go ahead and engage the brush roll. Right now it is freewheeling, so that is your floor mode. We're gonna go ahead and switch it. And now we are in carpet mode, and we're going to go ahead and test this out with the belt. There is no slippage. So everything is engaging positively. We've got good action here with regard to the movable cam, the fixed cam, the idler pulley, and the clutch. We've aligned everything so that it's all working properly. It is fully engaged when it's in carpet mode and fully disengaged, as you can see by this gap right here, when it is in floor, leaving this to spin free. So that's exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and button this guy up. All right, so we just cleaned that up a little bit. We're gonna go ahead and take this, gonna drop this. There are tracks right here where this clips into place, and we're gonna push down until these click. And now we're going to lock it into place right here, okay? So you might be saying, Matt, well, if I'm gonna spend $500 on a vacuum, I want a vacuum where stuff like this doesn't happen, and I'm going to tell you that just doesn't exist. Here's the good thing about a vacuum like this. This has been really heavily used. You can tell by how much they're switching that on and off, how much the brushes have worn. This is a heavily used machine. Not saying it's abused, just heavily used. It's doing what it's intended to do. And there are going to be wear items that wear out. And the great thing about a quality vacuum like this is you do a small repair like this and you're back on the road. With a lot of other vacuums, the parts wouldn't be available, cost would be prohibitive, you'd be replacing entire assemblies, and you'd be looking for a new vacuum. So something like this saves you money over the long term. Let's look at the age. This vacuum here, obviously very heavily used, was manufactured in June of 2017, and right now it is December of 2020. So we are looking at 3.5 years of very heavy usage. You know, again, I don't know what kind of carpeting. I see that kind of wear a lot when you're dealing with commercial carpeting. So this might even be used in like a office or something like that. But yeah, it's definitely been used heavily. And for its use and the fact that they're, you know, switching that they're switching the clutch while the vacuum's on. This was kind of to be expected. What I'm going to let the customer know is that when they do make that switch to on and off, to make sure to turn the vacuum off first. That will save them another clutch plate later on. The clutch plates, if you do that, will last years and years and years, no problem. So as long as you know that trick. These brushes, they were worn. They may need a new set in another 3 years, but again, it's a relatively simple and inexpensive fix. The brush strips on these guys cost $7.51 each. So all in for parts, you're looking at about just under $30 for the brushes. So yeah, not a bad repair at all. So in any case, this was kind of a fun one. I don't get to do machines like this. Well, I get to do Riccars, you know, since we're a dealer, but you know, being able to rebuild a brush roll. Most of the Riccars I see are in, you know, pretty great shape and I don't have to rebuild anything, but being able to do this was actually kind of fun because it harkens back to when I started in the late 90s in the vacuum industry, and back then we were dealing with a lot of vacuums from the 70s and 80s, and those were the kind of vacuums that you could get in and rebuild a motor, rebuild a brush roll, and those days are slowly leaving us. But with vacuums like this, you know, it gives me hope that there are still companies that get it and that quality machines still exist. So, you know, if you're looking for a really good upright, Riccar is one of the shortlist names that I would look at. We are a Riccar dealer, so if you're ever interested in one, reach out to us. You can visit us at thehouseofvacs.com, and we'd be happy to talk about Riccars, about SIBO, you know, other options that are out there. But in any case, I appreciate you joining me for this this therapeutic rebuild. And if you like this, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. And of course, we will see you in the next one. Bye.